Hello, and welcome to Ending Physician Overwhelm. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Mello. I'm a family and obesity medicine physician, as well as a certified life coach for physicians. In this podcast, we talk about how the learned habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and a lack of boundaries show up in our lives and how they contribute to burnout, exhaustion, and overwhelm. The healthcare system is broken, my friends, but let's not wait for it to be fixed in order to feel better. Well, hello again, and welcome back. Today's episode is part 2 of life lessons learned from a business conference. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, I'd like you to go back at some point and listen to that, but you don't need to have heard anything that's in last week's episode to get something out of today's. Basically, what I described in that episode were some different life lessons that I learned from having just come back from a conference for physician entrepreneurs that I'm a part of. So the conference is part of a coaching group that I'm in called the EntreMD Business School, which is run by Dr. Nneka Unachukwu, aka Dr. Una, who is a pediatrician with multiple 7-figure businesses, including a successful insurance-based pediatric clinic that she started, as well as this coaching group that I'm in. So many of you listening may be ready to fast forward past this episode and just skip it. You're like, I'm not in business. This doesn't apply to me. But hear me out, because the lessons that come out of this work apply everywhere in our lives. This is not very businessy at all. And even if you're an employed physician and you never, ever want to have anything to do with business, there's something in here for you. It's not about business. It's really about learning principles that help us to gain clarity and build lives that we love while doing work that we care about. Okay, so let's get started. Lesson number 1. To achieve your goals, you have to be willing to pay the price. So let's start off by taking a deep breath here. You have done hard things. And my guess is that if you're listening to this podcast, you continue to do hard things all day, every day. So when you hear me say that you have to be willing to pay the price, that might make you angry. And that's important to recognize, but let's unpack this a little bit more. In order to change something about your life, something that's important to you, you're going to need to make changes that feel uncomfortable, maybe even off limits, and let go of things that currently feel like obstacles. That's paying the price. So last week, I talked a lot about an example of wanting to run a 10K, and even wanting to run a 10K, even if you're someone who doesn't currently exercise at all. And I'm going to continue with that example, even though I'm not a runner. I just think it nicely illustrates working towards a goal. So in this case, if we want to be able to run a 10K, what is the price? What does it cost us to make this happen? So we need to be able to dedicate time to training, which means we're going to have to spend less time doing something else. And probably we're going to have to say no to some things and no to some people. We will need to be able to first walk regularly and then be able to jog at least a tiny bit before we're going to be in condition to run even a 1K, let alone a 10K. So there might be some physical discomfort of our legs and our lungs and our body as we get into shape. What else? What else does it cost? We might invest in proper shoes so we don't hurt ourselves. We might hire a trainer or a coach. We might buy ourselves something cute to wear while we exercise, all those kinds of things. These are all different costs in order to meet our goal. So if I don't currently run at all, I'm going to have to spend time, energy, experience discomfort, and probably some money to make it all happen. Now, depending on, how you're doing right now, what mood you're in, where your mindset is, you might look at all of these costs and say, that's too expensive. I'm not doing all that. And you might feel frustrated that it's not easier for you to do what you want to do. My mentor calls this shoplifting your goals. You might keep talking about wanting the goal, but you aren't willing to pay for it. And maybe that leads you to making little changes here and there, but they aren't really well thought out. They aren't very intentional, and they don't get you to your goal. I think most of us have done this with one goal or another, especially if that goal was very personal, and we weren't accountable to anyone else. Whether that is wanting to quit and open your own practice, start an exercise plan, learn a new language, get a promotion, developing new skills of some kind, we won't get there through shoplifting and magical thinking. You have to sit down and think, what is the cost of achieving my goal? And then consider, am I willing to pay these costs or not? And if the answer is no, you don't really want the goal, you can give it up and move on, right? Rather than holding on to the goal, but not being willing to pay the price, right? That just creates emotional distress and usually a lot of shoulding on ourselves, right? I should be doing this, I should be doing that, but I'm not. I'm just making myself feel gross. Lesson number 2, what gets scheduled gets done. So like many of you, my desk can be cluttered with to-do lists. I do still use to-do lists, even though most of the time I operate without them, but I use them quite differently than I used to. And I know when I'm slipping back into my old habits and I'm getting over reliant on them, that they fail me, just as they do most of us. Because many, many things end up on our to-do list, and we often start cherry picking the easy, quick ones, and we never quite get to the bigger, harder ones. And we can look at our to-do list and we can actually break it down into a few categories. Number 1, time sensitive and important. Number 2, not time sensitive and important. Number 3, time sensitive, but not important. Number 4, not time sensitive, not important. You can read books, that talk about sort of breaking down to-do lists this way. And I would argue that many of us, we take care of the time sensitive and important things, especially if somebody labels it urgent and puts it in front of us, right? We're very well conditioned to respond to urgent things. But it's much harder to deal with the not necessarily time sensitive, but still important things. And I'm using the term time sensitive here because I think, urgent gets overused and it's a trigger for us. And, the people who live with us and work with us know that they can often get our attention by saying that something is urgent. And of course, they misuse it all the time. But what I mean here is that there are some things that have deadlines. For example, you are required to submit for vacation, time off 6 months in advance. It is time sensitive in that you have to pay attention 6 months in advance to be able to request the time off. Although nothing happens to you right now if you don't do that. So, but, again, if we're not paying attention to time, and we don't make the request in February, then we probably can't get time off over the summer at all. We probably can't get time off until September. So when we read something like, quote unquote, plan vacation on our to-do list, it will always end up being something that we push off because it's not an easy checkbox. And, it's not on fire right now. It's not time sensitive to plan our vacation, even though there are some components of it that need attention, months in advance. But there are no consequences right now to me not blocking time off 6 months from now. There are absolutely future consequences for you. And my guess is that those things for you are getting bumped by priorities, usually priorities that involve other people, such as, I have to sign up for my son's soccer team, and other activities that are more discrete tasks than something like, quote unquote, planned vacation. But we don't want to keep doing things this way. We want to figure out for something like this, where there are steps involved, right? Steps would be blocking the time off 6 months in advance, researching a few destinations that we would like to travel to, making a decision where we're going to go, booking tickets, etc., right? How much time am I going to spend on each step? When am I going to get them done? And then They don't go on your to-do list. They need to go on your calendar. This was always really hard for me because I struggled to think 6 months in advance about anything to do with leisure. I could, think this way professionally, but for something that felt, quote unquote, inconsequential, right? It felt not important 6 months in advance, which is how I would, have described vacation at that time. I ended up not planning ahead, and then I couldn't get my requests in. I would be feeling overwhelmed, trying to think that far in advance. I'd be in resistance. It shouldn't have to be this way. I shouldn't have to put in a request 6 months in advance. And then guess what? No vacation. So some of you I know are much better at this, but it's a skill that we can all learn. There are predictable things, such as planning ahead, however far in advance is required for you to be on your calendar at the time so that they need to get done with dedicated time allotted to actually doing those things so they do actually get done. So you can do this for many areas of your life. You can do this for vacations, routine medical appointments for you and your family or your pets. You need to have a haircut every so often. You need to clean the gutters every so often, oil changes, your CME, credits that need to be earned to maintain your certifications, holidays, etc. You know that all these things should generally happen, but if they aren't anywhere on your calendar, then you're not making time for them, and they end up getting pushed around the edges, right? They end up getting squeezed into places here and there, but often in a pinch and a rush. So it may be difficult for you to start thinking this way, but if you start scheduling these things, or even better, delegating some of them, then you're so much more likely to actually get the things done. And, it's true for general life stuff, which is important, right? Haircuts, gutter cleaning, all those fun, amazing things. But this is also a really helpful framework for us to adopt for our personal goals as well. So again, if we use the run a 10K, as a goal, we're going to need to know, what are the costs? How long is it going to take to train? How much time per week do I need to spend on it, etc., so we can actually get that on the calendar. Hope is not a strategy. No one hopes that they can run a 10K without having done one. Or if you are that magical creature, please send me a message. I'd be fascinated to meet you. But most of us won't just spontaneously run a 10K. We need to stop hoping that our priorities get done and instead start deciding how and when they're going to get done. Put it on the calendar. Lesson number 3. You need a team. You need a team. Find your community. Takes a village. This is not a new lesson for us, but one that many of us high achievers don't want to hear. Why is that? It probably comes down to one of these things. It could be discomfort with setting expectations and, holding people accountable and giving feedback. You might think, why would I hire someone to do something I can do myself? And that could be household chores, administrative tasks, etc. You might think, it's too expensive. We might believe that we should do it for some reason. You might say, I tried to get help before and the results were a disaster. Maybe somebody didn't do a good job. Maybe somebody didn't do the thing at all. You didn't like the way they did it, etc. It also might never have occurred to us that we could ask for help. Now, team can mean different things, of course, in different settings and different circumstances, and teams evolve over time. And creating a team and leading a team is absolutely an investment in time and energy, and it involves the discomfort of needing to set expectations, train people, hold them accountable, give them feedback, which is a real struggle for many of us if you're a people pleaser like myself. But what's going on right now for you? So if you're currently staying late at work, completing administrative and inbox tasks, cleaning your own house, doing the yard work, trying to drive all the kids to all the places, what is that costing you? So I'd like to look at it from this perspective of thinking about what is our hourly rate? So Physician salaries vary tremendously, of course, but let's just for easy math say that your salary works out to $100 per hour for 35 hours of patient contact per week. We'll just keep the math really easy. Okay. So you spend your time, your 35 hours seeing patients, and then you're spending 2 hours every night closing charts 5 nights a week. You're spending 6 hours each weekend cleaning the house, and another 2 hours weeding, and then 4 hours on the weekend catching up with your inbox. If we do the math and we add in that extra time, you just dropped your hourly wage from $100 an hour to $59 per hour. Not to mention, you lost 22 hours per week. And I hear you out there, right? Before you start arguing that you're understaffed and you can't get help, I absolutely hear you. Staffing sucks right now everywhere, all across clinics, all across hospital settings. It is an absolute problem. And you probably don't have a lot of control over that. But that doesn't mean that you can't ask for help. It doesn't mean that you should ever get used to doing all the things by yourself. It doesn't mean that you should never delegate. And it absolutely doesn't mean that you shouldn't hire help at home, even if that's just freeing up just a chunk of that time that we talked about, unless weeding the garden is something that you really love. If you really love weeding the garden, and I know that there are some of you out there who do, who get a lot of satisfaction out of pulling weeds out, great, keep that one, but have somebody else clean the toilets. You know what I mean? I think we get very tied up in our ability to get stuff done because we are amazing and we can do lots and lots of things. And then we get told that we, can't have more help at work because of staffing shortages, or, because we're uncomfortable with setting expectations and holding people accountable. We start to internalize that we should do it all. It's just not true. You need a team. You need a team who helps to free up your time to focus on the higher level work that you need to do at work, and who helps to free up your time at home for the rest and relaxation that you deserve. That's probably a whole podcast episode all by itself. So I'm going to stop here and we're going to move on to the next lesson, but I want you to really think about this one. Lesson number 4, progress requires auditing. This one doesn't come naturally to most of us. Do you sit down and regularly take a look at your progress towards your goals? Or do you only see how far away the goal is and maybe get frustrated and give up? Most physicians I know are excellent at celebrating small wins for their patients and terrible at giving themselves credit for progress, right? Nothing makes most physicians cringe more than, being thanked or, especially appreciated for some minor thing that they've done. I was just talking with a physician earlier today, and she told me that she had it on her calendar that she was going to meditate for 10 minutes this morning, and then she was going to do 20 minutes of yoga, and then she was going to go for a 20-minute run. And what ended up happening was that she ran for 10 minutes. But did she give herself credit for running for 10 minutes? Not at all. She saw, all she could see, right, was that other 40 minutes of things that she planned to do that didn't happen. Even though this was a brand new plan for her, she hadn't done this before. It wasn't her, established habit. And so she called it a failure. And many, many, many of us would do the same thing. We are conditioned to look for our deficiencies and our shortcomings. We are not conditioned to celebrate our wins, to see the progress, or to feel good about what we've accomplished. But it turns out that this way that we were conditioned not only feels terrible, that's something we know already, but it's not at all supported by behavioral science. You can't shame yourself and should yourself into doing better sustainably. You can use shame as a tool for a little while. You can white knuckle your way through and belittle yourself and, think that that's what you need to do in order to kick your butt into gear. But it does not build habits successfully, and it feels awful. So if you have goals, even air quotes here, just personal goals, it helps to sit down, look at where you are and where you want to go, and identify milestones along the way that you're going to work towards and how you're going to celebrate each milestone, right? And have a plan to sit down periodically, whether that's once a week, once a month, right? And look at it and see where you are, right? That's auditing. This was baked into our path previously. There were certain, things that we needed to do to get into medical school. There were milestones in medical school, like your step tests and in residency. And my guess is that you probably celebrated in some way after achieving those things, right? Even if, just for a minute. It's the same thing here, but it takes you deciding on what those milestones are and learning to celebrate them and give them meaning. Yes, you can also look at where you didn't show up for yourself, where you need to make changes, but more importantly, intentionally spending time on the good parts, the progress, as a tool to inspire us to keep going. Again, especially if the goal is a personal one and you aren't accountable to others, right? That's where we tend to do the worst. Lesson number 5. Failure is required for growth. So I've talked on the podcast about this before, but I think it always bears repeating. The way that you learn how to do something that you've never done before is to try and fail over and over and over again. You started life this way and you were great at failing as a toddler. And then what happened, right? As you grew up, especially if you were a higher achiever, failure often became a fearful or a shameful thing. You learned that not winning wasn't okay. It may have been as a child, you might have been a teenager when you learned this or later, but somewhere along the way, the external validation from winning and the way that most of us were trained with a healthy dose of shaming for not knowing the answer on rounds, for example, coming in second or last in a competition, all of this was toxic comparison that taught you that failure is not okay. But what happens when you aren't willing to fail and the stakes get higher and higher? Our world tends to get smaller and smaller. We don't take risks. We play it small and safe. We don't risk disappointing people by setting boundaries. We don't apply for the promotion that we want because, we don't have all of the qualifications. Our unwillingness, our fear of failure keeps us stuck and small and in a box. And good things don't happen in a box. Instead, you feel isolated, ignored, trapped. Because failure feels unsafe, you stay in the box, right? Even if the lid is open, that safety becomes more important to you than daring your fears. That's not how we do anything worthwhile. It's not how we start training for a 10K when we don't currently exercise. It's not how we get promoted or decide to open a business. It's not how we decide to start dating again after divorce. My business mentor likes to say, where there is success, first there was fear. And it may seem like a cute businessy or sportsy type message, but it really applies to any goal that we have. Where there is success, first there was fear. It makes sense that we fear failure, given the competitive nature of our training and the consequences of mistakes when it comes to patients' lives. But most of the things in our life that we want to do are not actually dangerous. It may feel dangerous because our nervous system is wired to believe that failure puts us at risk, but in reality, very little of the time is that true. Failure is a part of growth, learning, and deciding to do anything big. It's part of the process. Since opening my business 2 years ago, I have had many, many failures. And there were many times when I thought, see, I can't do this. But because I've learned to be in communities where we talk about wins and challenges, we share our failures and we learn from each other, we normalize the discomfort of setting boundaries and having big goals, I've had the support I needed in those moments of failure to keep going. And it's made a huge, huge difference. So I just want to say that no matter what important thing you are trying to do, failure is a part of it. Don't be afraid of it. Let's just normalize it. Okay, so let's recap the 5 lessons that I've shared for this week. Number one, to achieve your goals, you have to be willing to pay the price. Number two, what gets scheduled gets done. Number three, you need a team. Number four, progress requires auditing. Number five, failure is required for growth. And I'm going to sneak one more in here, which is that people have to hear the same things over and over and over again. And it's funny, when I look back at this conference, there wasn't anything there that was new material for me. I've been, in this program for about a year and 5 months now. And I've seen the content before. I've worked through it before. I've repeated it. I've come back to it. And yet each time we go through it, something new comes out because I am not the same each time that I hear these lessons. The same is true for our patients, our staff, our administrators. If you feel like a broken record sometimes, that's actually good. Be consistent in your message. Be clear on what the goals are. Could be patient safety issues, could be job satisfaction or retention issues, etc. Be prepared to ask or tell people the same things over and over again and stand in your authority as an expert. They are different every time they hear it. You get better at delivering your message. And at some point, they're going to have heard it enough times that they're going to come over to your side. Okay, done. 6 lessons for you for the price of 5. Excuse me. Thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate your time and attention. And whether I'm joining you on your morning commute or your drive home or a walk or however you listen to podcasts, I do sincerely appreciate your attention. If you're listening to this in real time, this is the last week to register for the spring 2023 cohort of Healing Perfectionism in Women Physicians, where we do this work together. I'm so excited to be starting up again next week on Sunday, May 14th. And so if you're a woman in medicine and you're ready to get unstuck from people-pleasing, lack of boundaries, and perfectionist habits, you're going to want to get registered as soon as possible before the spots are gone. Head on over to www.healthierforgood.com and click Healing Perfectionism Group, the button up in the top left. If you missed this round, you're listening to the podcast episode a little bit later, or it doesn't work for you to join right now, no worries. That same button is going to link you to a wait list once registration for the spring cohort closes. All right. I hope you have a wonderful week and take care until next time. Bye-bye.
Well, that's our show for today. Thank you as always for listening. To learn more about my coaching programs, head to www.healthierforgood.com. And if you love this podcast, please drop us a review on iTunes or support the show by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time, take care.